Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Boyd, Senior Strategic Planner in the City of Bothell Community Development Department. Welcome to the City of Bothell Middle Housing Community Forum. Thank you all for coming and giving your input on a lovely spring evening and also through the online survey. As of this morning, we had over 100 responses, so we're looking forward to a lively discussion tonight. I want to introduce our team. I've got kind of managing the overall program and letting people into the room and assigning them to breakout rooms when the time comes is Community Engagement Specialist, Sarah Frost. We're also joined by Senior Planner Nathan Lamb, both of the Bothell Community Development Department. We're joined by Mike Stanger of ARCH, a regional coalition for housing, who acts as our housing staff and expertise in all manners of housing. And our consultant team, Sarah Breakstone and Sierra Carlson of OTAC. We're here tonight because the Puget Sound area is in a housing crisis, which shows no signs of abating. The Puget Sound Regional Council predicts the region will grow by 1.8 million people by 2050. We've received strong policy direction, both from the state and from our own city council, to consider a wide range of strategies to increase housing production, variety, and affordability. Middle housing is one part of that, along with capacity increases accompanied by affordable housing requirements in downtown and Canyon Park so far. Others being considered near frequent bus service beyond those areas, a multifamily tax exemption program that we adopted last year, and increases in the city's contribution to the Arch Trust Fund, which will help create truly affordable housing throughout the East King County region. So middle housing isn't by any means the whole solution, but is an important part of Bothell's overall housing strategy. So to provide the details on what is being considered, Sarah Breakstone of OTAC will provide a presentation, including the agenda for this evening. So again, thanks for coming, and I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Sarah Breakstone. I'm a senior planner and project manager with a company called OTAC. I live and work in Portland, Oregon. I've been doing land use planning for probably about the last 15 years in Oregon and Washington. So happy to see so many people here. I'm going to share my screen. We've got a presentation. How's that look? People can see that?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Great. Just need to move some things around so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Here is a quick look at our agenda for the evening. I'll spend a little time just on some background and summarizing the sort of high level objectives for this work. Why is the city doing this work? And then I'll get into a little bit of detail about some of the potential strategies that the city is exploring for middle housing. I suspect there's probably people here who have seen some of this information before and are familiar with it. And there's probably people here for whom this is all brand new information. So I'm going to try to explain these concepts as best I can, but just know that there will be time for questions when I get through it. If you need clarification or additional detail, and then we'll move into small group discussions, because really the main objective for tonight is to hear from all of you about some of these concepts that the city is exploring. So we'll have small group discussions probably for about 20 minutes. Those will be facilitated. And then we'll come back together for a sort of report back to talk about what we heard during our small group discussions, and we'll wrap up. We're scheduled to wrap up at 7:30, so we won't go past that. We may wrap up sooner, depends on how many questions and how much discussion we have. So that is what the evening is looking like. Just a quick note about logistics. Make sure you stay on mute if you're not talking so that we don't get a lot of background noise. And when we get to the question portion, if you can use your raise hand function, that is helpful to us, helps us facilitate the question and answer.
And the raised hand function is in the reactions button at the bottom of your screen.
Yes, thank you. So what is this project about? It's primarily about housing. As Dave mentioned, there is a housing crisis in this country, and it's impacting just about every city from coast to coast, from rural areas to urban areas, and everywhere in between. And Bothel's no exception. There is an identified need for more housing in Bothell, and particularly a need for more types of housing, of a greater variety of housing types to meet the broad range of needs and preferences in Bothell households or potential Bothell households, excuse me. And in addition to that, there's a need for more affordable housing prices. And so the city is really interested in creating opportunity for more affordable housing. This is not new. The city's been looking at this for a while. In 2020, Bothell received a grant from the Department of Commerce to look at ways to promote housing development. And through that grant, the city worked with a consultant to adopt some new regulations related to duplexes. So these were rules and regulations, standards that were adopted into the Bothell zoning code, and they essentially allow duplexes to be constructed on corner lots in any residential zone where a single family home is also permitted. Excuse me. And along with that, there were some additional standards and some parking considerations that were sort of part of that package of code amendments related to duplexes. And through that process, the Planning Commission and City Council identified support and interest in exploring additional measures to promote housing, particularly middle housing, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And so that's kind of what led into this project that we're doing currently. So far, the city, we at OTAC have been working closely with the city and others to do some research, do some outreach, looking at best practices, looking at what other jurisdictions are doing around housing, and trying to identify some potential strategies that could work in Bothell. And to be very clear, these are strategies that are related to the zoning code specifically. So we're not looking at programmatic changes or funding programs or things like that. We are focused on standards, rules, regulations that can be adopted into the zoning code, potentially incentives that can be adopted into the zoning code. But we're very focused on the zoning code. That's what this work is about. So I just want to make sure that that is clear up front. This is kind of a flow chart, I guess, of the different phases of our project. As I mentioned, we are focused on code amendments and looking for strategies that can be used in the code to allow and support and facilitate more middle housing development in Bothell. Right now, we're in this sort of discuss phase where we've identified some strategies that the city would like to explore, and now we are reaching out to stakeholders, reaching out to decision makers. We've been talking to Planning Commission, City Council, staff, and now we are reaching out to the broader community as well, which is part of what this meeting is about and also part of what the online survey is about. And once we have done the outreach, done the research, and feel like we've gotten the feedback that we need to get, we will move into drafting and reviewing adoption-ready code amendments. And there'll be several iterations of drafting language, reviewing, refining, redrafting before we move into adoption of the code amendments, which will happen through a public adoption process. So it'll go to a hearing before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will make a recommendation to City Council, and those are, of course, public hearings. So that's the project in a nutshell. I've mentioned middle housing several times already. It's a term that gets tossed around a lot these days, at least in the world that I live in. And what we mean when we talk about middle housing is this range of housing buildings that have more than one unit, but are really designed and planned and intended to be compatible in scale and form with single family homes. So we're talking about duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, which you might know as row homes, cottage clusters, courtyard apartments. All of these are considered middle housing types, and they're basically the range of housing types that exist between your standard multifamily apartment building and a standard single home on its own lot. So that is what we are talking about when we talk about middle housing. This image that you're seeing on the screen shows middle housing as kind of a transition between single detached and multifamily apartment. That's not necessarily how it needs to be. Middle housing can be integrated and scattered throughout existing or new residential neighborhoods and blend in with other housing types. A little bit more description of these housing types. So when I'm talking about duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, I mean a 2, 3, or 4 unit building on a single lot. And the units can be ownership units, they can be rental units, they can be a mix, they can be condominiums. But the building is an attached building and all of the units are on a single lot. Townhomes are single family residences that are on their own lot, but they share a wall with their neighboring building. So these are traditional row house styles. They're attached. They're usually referred to as like a single family attached product. Cottage clusters are small single family units that are on the same lot, typically on a single lot, and they are clustered around a common courtyard. They tend to have shared parking. There tends to be like a minimum of 4 really to sort of qualify as a cottage cluster. And the units themselves tend to have a smaller footprint, like somewhere around 800 square feet, plus or minus. A courtyard apartment is kind of like a cottage cluster, except the units are attached instead of detached from another. So they're attached, but again, sort of organized around a common courtyard area and typically have some sort of shared parking arrangement off to the side or behind the building. There's variety of configurations that can apply within each of these different housing types. And again, units can be ownership units, they can be rental units. There's a variety of options. Oops. Let me move my screen around. Okay. So when we are talking about code strategies that the city is exploring, probably the first and most important one is simply allowing middle housing to be built in residential neighborhoods in Bothell. And so the city is exploring the idea of allowing all of these middle housing types in new single family subdivisions. So they would do this through a density bonus to facilitate middle housing development. So the way this would work is if a developer wanted to plan a new residential subdivision, they would be allowed to exceed the maximum density for that zone if they were providing some of these middle housing types. And it wouldn't be middle housing types on every single lot. They would be scattered throughout. And the density bonus would vary depending on how close the development is to a transit stop or a regional trail. So I think right now, the city is exploring roughly a 20% density bonus for new developments that are not close to transit or trails, and potentially up to a 40% bonus for developments that are within a half-mile walk of a transit stop or a regional trail. And again, just as a reminder, we're very much in the exploratory phase. So these numbers are numbers that have been tossed around, but have by no means been set in stone. Along the same lines, the city is also exploring the idea of allowing these middle housing types in existing residential neighborhoods. So not necessarily just new subdivisions, but existing neighborhoods. That would enable a property owner to, for example, convert their single family home into a triplex, or potentially combine 2 lots and build a cottage cluster. So I just wanted to be clear that the city is exploring 2 different approaches, allowing middle housing in new subdivisions and or allowing middle housing in existing residential neighborhoods. We're also looking at ways to create opportunity for more affordable housing. Middle housing can be naturally more affordable because the units tend to be smaller and
No, I had to.
Oh, I think somebody came off mute. And they tend to use less land or have less land associated with them. So the city is exploring affordability requirements that would target home ownership for households that make 80% or less of the area median income, which for your county in 2021, I think was about $90,500 for a household of 4. The city has existing requirements for affordable units in the downtown and Canyon Park areas. So what this strategy would do would expand this requirement to new subdivisions citywide and not just in those 2 areas. The way it would work is a new subdivision that came in with 5 or more units, or new development with 5 or more units, would have to set aside a percentage of those units for long-term regulated affordability. And I believe the range of requirement that the city is considering now is somewhere between 5 and 10%. So 5 to 10% of units would need to be set aside for this long-term affordability. We're also exploring the idea of maybe increasing that threshold from 5 units to 10, partially because if you have a 5-unit development and a 10% affordability requirement, that only gets you a half a unit. So that is a piece of it. So we're also looking at development standards because it's important, obviously, to allow these middle housing types as permitted uses, but you also need to make sure that the development regulations or the development standards that apply to them are reasonable and aren't serving as barriers to middle housing development. So we're looking primarily at setbacks and lot coverage and making sure that setback requirements are appropriate and lot coverage maximums are appropriate to really facilitate middle housing types and make sure that people are able to maximize the development potential on their property. We're also looking at standards around accessory dwelling units, ADUs. An accessory dwelling unit is a standalone dwelling that exists on the same lot as a primary single family home. And so there's lots of different configurations. They can be a detached unit, like a small backyard cottage home. They can be a studio unit above a garage, or a studio unit on the 3rd floor, or a basement studio. Lots of different configurations, but typically, an ADU is smaller and secondary to the primary dwelling on the lot. And ADUs are great because they provide an opportunity for the property owner to have some rental income, or perhaps provide a living space for an extended family member, like a kid that's in college, or an aging parent. It really gives people flexibility to do more with the land that they have. ADUs are currently allowed in Bothell. I believe, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the standards now allow one ADU on any lot that also has a single family home on it. But there are quite a few restrictions that come with those ADU rules, and they may be serving as a barrier to ADU development. And so the city is looking for ways to relax some of those restrictions to facilitate more ADUs in Bothell. And last but not least, we're looking at parking. Parking's always a hot issue. People don't want too much parking. People want enough parking. But parking is a really important consideration when you're looking at affordability of housing, because every parking space you add bumps up the cost of that unit, and it takes up space. And so we're looking at ways to potentially reduce parking requirements, not eliminate, but reduce parking requirements for middle housing that is located, again, near a transit stop or a regional trail. And when I say near, we're typically talking about within a half-mile walk, not a half-mile straight line radius, but a half-mile actual walk. And this is similar to what the city is doing now for duplexes. So that package of duplex amendments that was adopted last year also included reduced parking requirements for duplexes that are near transit and trails. And that requirement is reduced to one off-street parking space per unit. Whereas if you're not near transit or trails, the requirement, I believe, is 2 off-street parking spaces per unit. Dave, can you confirm that it's 2?
Yes, it's actually 2.2 because we also require a guest parking space for every 5 units.
Gotcha. Thank you. So those are the highlights of the strategies that we are exploring with the city. We have time now to stop and ask questions. We want to hear feedback for sure. And I think that there's going to be plenty of time to do that during the breakout room. So I think right now, if you have questions, like you want some clarification or you didn't understand one of the concepts, maybe this is a good time for questions. And we can save feedback for the small group discussions. And Sarah Frost, maybe you can help me to facilitate. I have a lot of screens here and I can't quite see everybody. So if you have a question and you can use your raise hand function, that would be great. And Sarah can help. And I also see.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat that says, how strict is the 0.5 miles? Looks like somebody's at 0.7.
Oh,
Yeah, and I was just about to respond in chat, but
go ahead, Dave.
The requirement for corner lot duplexes is a 1/2 mile, a 1/2 mile walking distance. So that doesn't really provide any leeway. So that's something that we could reconsider in terms of what we adopt for other middle housing types. But right now it is a strict 0.5 miles. And I want to reinforce that it is walking distance. The map that we showed on the survey showed a full 1/2 mile radius, but that's just to identify the areas within which you might be able to get that reduction if you do have that direct walking connection.
Other questions at this point?
Looks like there's another one in the chat here. What's the minimum lot sizes that are being considered?
I can take that one.
Sure.
So we're sticking with the current minimum lot size. So in our 7,200 zoned area, the subdivision would still create minimum 70 or 7,200 square foot lots. But then you would be able to have the ability to put a mix of middle housing options on some of the lots based on the bonus density that you could get.
Thanks, Dave.
There was also a question about an easy way to see where the nearest stop is. We do have a map on the survey, and it's in the presentations to the Planning Commission packets for this that do show all the existing stops in the city, and even show the number of runs that during morning and afternoon rush hours. And we'll update those maps as we go. So keep an eye on the middle housing webpage on the city website.
Other questions for now?
I have a question. You mentioned the survey. Is the survey available yet?
Yes, the survey is online, and I will show a link to the survey at the end of this presentation, or you can go to the city's website and find it there. And maybe Dave or Sarah can be more specific about where to go on the city's website to find that.
Yeah, it is posted on the middle housing page.
And the survey will be up and running until June 6th. So you have about another week plus to participate
Oh,
if you're
yeah,
interested.
good point. I can probably put the link in the chat. Let me work
You
on that.
can. Yeah, thanks.
I will work on that while you all are in the breakout rooms. I feel like I'm
Great.
gonna click something. Disappear.
Send us all off on the
Yeah.
breakout room abyss. Okay, and then there's another question. My property is 0.5 miles driving and 0.6 walking. Assuming that we can walk on roads, I think it's still half mile. Dave can probably speak to that. My understanding is that it's kind of up to the applicant to make demonstration that it is a half mile walk. And then the city staff would review it and either agree or ask for some, verification or refinement. Is that typically how that works, Dave?
Yeah, I would say that we understand that not all Bothell streets have sidewalks. So when we say walking distance, doesn't necessarily mean on sidewalks. So, but if part of that area that doesn't have sidewalks is 522, we probably wouldn't consider that a suitable walking route. So that's something that will, as Sarah said, it'll be up to the applicant to demonstrate that their project is within a half mile, and then our reviewers will confirm that. And we'll probably also include some criteria in the code language to make that as clear as possible.
Any other questions before we move into breakout rooms? Let's see. This is a long question. If you get a bonus, let's see. Justin, are you able to
Yeah, I can just
unmute
explain it.
and
Yeah, so basically, look, I have a 15,000 square foot lot. It's our 7,200. If I destroy my home, which would be like a crime against nature, I can just subdivide and be done with it. But I'm trying to avoid destroying this very nice home that a lot of you have seen just driving down 88. So I can easily do 5,400. Sorry, my baby is acting up a bit, but yeah, I can't do 7,200 without destroying the home. That's just like a foregone conclusion. But if you get a bonus, would I be able to have a lot that's not 7,200, basically?
Justin, I've looked at this particular parcel, and it is a bit complicated, but I think these provisions will create some options for you, options that don't exist in our current code. And I do plan to use your situation as a case study
Awesome.
to look at other options that we might want to address with these code amendments.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to work with you, and I have the funds, the means, the opportunity, everything. I've been wanting to do something with this huge cleared backyard for a long time, and the new street provides all the utilities and everything you need for this exact scenario. And I'm an experienced landlord as well. I've already got duplexes, fourplexes. I know what tenants want and need and everything. So I'm a perfect partner here.
Great.
Great, thank you. One more question from Mac. What is considered the size of a bus stop to be considered? Dave, maybe you can speak to that. Do bus routes have to have a certain frequency during peak hours to count as a transit stop, or is it any transit stop?
So 2 years ago, the state mandated some parking reductions near frequent transit, and they created a few different definitions for frequent transit depending on the housing type. The one that we chose for the corner lot duplexes was at least two service with at least 2 stops per hour for 12 continuous hours a day. And so I would start with that, and you can find that in the code for corner lot duplexes. And that's certainly something that we can discuss as we take this through Planning Commission and to City Council.
All right. I think we are ready to move into the breakout rooms for small group discussions. Sarah Frost is going to assign people randomly and evenly, and each group will have a facilitator. And we've got about 5 questions that we'd like to go through with you. So I think we'll take about 20 minutes in our breakout rooms. And you don't need to do anything. Something will pop up on your screen. It'll say, we're asking you to join. You click join, it'll take you right there. And then when we're done, Sarah will bring us all back. It would be great if somebody from each small group discussion would volunteer to take a few notes and do a report back when we all come back together as a large group. Facilitators can do it, but it's I think nicer for everyone to hear from the community rather than the project team. So your facilitator will ask for volunteers when you get into your small groups. I do see an additional question. Sarah, are you ready to move us, or should we try to answer this question while you're getting organized?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'll take a quick. There are no plans to do any up zones in that area, what we know as Lower Maywood at this time as part of these code amendments.
Okay.
The question had to do with the area just now north of downtown, 185th to 190th, which is an area that has a lot of middle housing. It developed with a lot of middle housing when it was under King County, typical King County zoning. And it's now kind of a mishmash of multifamily and single family zoning. So let's go to.
Great. Take us
small
away,
groups.
Sarah, and we'll see you all back here soon.
Welcome back. If you're not muted, please go ahead and mute your mics.
That went by quickly.
That did go by quickly. We got through 2 of the 5 questions.
Uh-oh.
That's fine. Good discussion is good discussion. Let's see. So I don't know who was in what group, but I will ask somebody who volunteered to do the report back to do so. Karsten, why don't you go first? Karsten was part of our group, so that's great. Thank you.
So discussion group number 2. We didn't get time to talk to all the questions, but we got through most of them. The one that we started with is thoughts about allowing middle housing in existing and new neighborhoods. And there's broad support in our group for both, especially some more discussion about proximity to transit. That was really important, having access to modes that would get people out of their cars. Associated with that would be parking. The parking discussion is always robust in any meeting, but we especially touched on wanting to reduce parking minimums near transit. There's broad support for reductions everywhere, but generally near transit is that had the broadest appeal. We also talked about affordable housing requirements, and there is some hesitation and some concerns that maybe the costs associated with subsidy of affordable units might be passed on to the market rate units, the units that aren't affordable. And so wondering about how those costs would be compensated by the developers was a big component. There was sensitivity around wanting to make sure that affordable units didn't look or feel different than the market rate units either. And so that kind of puts it at odds a little bit, affordable housing at odds with, you know, how do we price that out? The last thing we talked about was ADUs, and we didn't have a huge discussion about it, but general support with those 2. People love ADUs.
Thanks, Karsten. I think the only thing that I would add to that is there was discussion around the concept for putting middle housing in existing neighborhoods and wanting to make sure that the tree canopy in existing neighborhoods is protected. Yeah. Who else? Volunteer from another group?
And Justin, I see your comments in the chat. I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, I posted the notes. The first
Thank
one,
you.
you might guess is me. I've doubled out too far back. I want to let homeowners use their land efficiently, especially some of the older lots. They're just sitting there doing nothing. I support affordability at certain thresholds for sure. Like the person from March was saying, the city is providing a lot of value. And as a person who's an experienced landlord, you know, I understand that value and I would take that bet. So I'm fine with that. And I feel that without some sort of density changes, all we do is sprawl more and more like the city of Dallas, and we just generate big single family homes that are, you know, not within reach of anyone. And it doesn't help the problem. It just creates a more car dependent culture. Another person in our group had an older home closer to downtown where they already have more high density. I believe they said something in the area of 4,000 square foot. Kind of wish I had that. I'd have a field day with that one. They're looking to subdivide, and we're looking what the options are being presented here. They already see people doing it across the street. You know, they think maybe it's time for their 1930s home to accommodate some of these changes. So that's why they're here. And then one person was preferred not to have too much density and felt that we were destroying too much green space, and was also more, I would say, they preferred sort of the private homeowner situation as opposed to a developer situation. So an ADU on a private homeowner's land didn't seem to have a problem with that. But like, for example, a developer buying an older home and then kind of rezoning, destroying everything and building up. So she had a bit more of an issue with that. So she's more of earlier someone mentioned mom and pop. So she's more of a mom and pop kind of person, especially with your own land. And she's more concerned that, yeah, that's what's going to happen is the developers will snap up the big lots, destroy everything, build huge complexes, and yeah, just change everything. Yeah.
Thank you.
Looks like
Let's
Valerie,
see.
Valerie
Valerie?
has her hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Valerie. You're muted.
Yeah. Our group only got through the first two questions, but I think we had a nice deep conversation about that and some real themes emerged. But one was, is this a policy to try to increase housing supply in general, or are we trying to increase affordability? And people really dug into that because I think there was kind of a big concern that sometimes if, especially I believe if an existing older home is demolished and two are put up, what is built ultimately may not be more affordable. So there was a real interest in having it also increase affordability, which led to the question about whether there should be some affordable regulation on that. We didn't exactly hear from the whole group on that question. So I don't know if I can't really say our whole group was interested in that, but just the general topic of the goal is to increase affordability was fairly prevalent. There were also a couple people said policy can sound great, but sometimes on the implementation end, things can be not pretty once they're implemented. And there really was an interest in maintaining the character feeling of the neighborhood. Somebody mentioned a suburban feel. Nobody mentioned trees, but we did have one person with a very nice backyard full of trees on the line. So I think there was a little bit of mistrust of developers that aren't currently owners in the area coming in and not really being sensitive to how things might look. There also was a concern that if it's an ADU, for example, and the whole group really liked the idea of ADUs, they felt there was something almost a bit unfair about ADU folks having to park on the street and not having automobile access to get to their dwelling unit. That was pretty much it. Just a lot of questions about implementation and how do you make it so that it can't be kind of twisted and convoluted and come out with an unattractive end product.
Understood. Thank you, Valerie. Was there a fourth group?
Sarah, I think my group is the last group. Believe there are 4 breakout rooms. Is that correct?
There were
Oh,
five.
there were 5.
Oh, there are 5.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
So 2
well,
more.
I'm not the last. I am going to do the recap for my group, though. We got through 4 out of the 5 questions. I would say that participants were supportive of middle housing types, mostly cottage housing. Big fan of sort of the small little homes. Everyone sort of like gets their piece, no shared walls. Would definitely like to see more of that type of housing happen within Bothell. We're also talked a little bit about affordable housing. We're pretty happy with sort of the requirements as is. We not really want to see thresholds dropped at all. We talked about affordable housing requirements working better in larger developments where they kind of just fit in more with everything else that's being developed as well. We talked a little bit about ADUs and parking. We talked about just a little bit of everything, but mostly, supportive of sort of the direction that we're going here and would like to see more ADUs as well developed within the city. I'd like to continue having setbacks. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And last but not least, the 5th group, please.
Yeah, we were, so I was the facilitator for group 3. So I'll go ahead and we did get to 2 questions and started on a 3rd. So I'll try to summarize our points and let the others weigh in if I miss anything. So generally our group shared some of the same sentiments that have already been shared by the other groups, and overall, the group sympathized with the fact that there's a real dire need for affordable housing right now. And so everyone supported that, but thought that it really should go. It's more appropriate for new subdivisions, especially for those higher density kind of units, while things, structures like ADUs and duplexes and triplexes are more appropriate for our existing neighborhoods. And what we kept coming back to was, like what was shared already, the design and the design standards for the units. The group thought that the standards should be firm, not only with regard to like the character of, the architecture, and making sure it's compatible with the neighborhood, but also with regard to like stormwater and sidewalks and infrastructure. And somebody also mentioned earlier, reduced green space as a result of allowing larger lot coverage. And so the concern really is that the standards would need to be firm. And then the last thing that I would say is, there were some examples cited for where units were supposed to be affordable in a couple neighborhoods. I'm not recalling those exact places in Bothell in which neighborhoods, but where they were supposed to be affordable, but there weren't strong enough protections, and they are unaffordable with regard to our conversation. And so if there was a way to make sure that the affordable component is mandatory, and that those protections are in place, would be best. So I think that's a good summary for our group, but I'll let others weigh in if I didn't mention something.
Great. Thank you. All right. I am going to share my screen again, just while we wrap up, primarily because the link to the survey is up there. So as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of in this exploration phase of this work right now. We will continue to do a little bit of research and outreach and discussion, and start to really refine some draft code amendments and work through those with Planning Commission and city staff and others until we get to, excuse me, a draft that we feel is ready to go to public hearings before the Planning Commission and City Council. And I think there's some timing on this next slide, so let me pull that up. Yes. Where is it? Oh, we're aiming for a Planning Commission hearing on June 15th. Dave, can you confirm that?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that a public hearing or another work session?
That's a public hearing. It'll actually probably be a bit of both. So we'll be reporting back to Planning Commission on this forum and on the survey. And the intent is to have at least some draft code amendments for Planning Commission to discuss, but we aren't expecting, and we will not be having a Planning Commission make a recommendation to Council
right
on June 15th. We will continue the public hearing to July 20th.
Thank you. Before I turn it back over to you, Dave, to wrap us up, I do want to remind everybody that the survey is up and running, and it has probably a little bit more detail and some maps that weren't part of the presentation tonight, and additional questions. There's some imagery on the website, so if you're interested in taking the survey, it's going to be up until June 6th, so there's plenty of opportunity to do so. The link is here, and again, if you go to the city's webpage and look at the middle housing page, you'll find the link there as well.
I also popped it in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And I think with that, I will just say thank you for the discussion and turn it back over to you, Dave, to send us on our way. And I'm going to stop sharing.
And since it is just 7:10, unless there are, well, first of all, so it is just 7:10. So I would like to give anybody else here in the room, if you have anything that you'd like to share that didn't get shared through the report back from the small rooms, or other ideas that have popped into your head during the discussion, go ahead and raise your hand or jump in. I can't see everybody, I don't believe, but here, a second, I think I saw Suzanne Burnell.
Oh, thanks, David. I just wanted to say that the concern I had, and it may be addressed in other planning documents, but there are a lot of, and this is a summary presentation, so I recognize that, but the presentation is talking about a lot of high density over a lot of areas in the city. And my concern is, that as these design codes are established, that things like stormwater drainage, green space, tree canopy, there's a lot of areas that we didn't cover tonight, and relaxing design codes or just increasing density doesn't allow for us to maintain the character of our community and our city. So I'm cautious, I'm optimistic we can accomplish that, but I just heard a lot of high density suggestions tonight without regard for some of these other components. And for us to have a livable and enjoyable community, we need other things too. So I just wanted to just make that comment.
Thank you. And I will say that we will be looking at all of that, and the density increases for middle housing are actually quite modest, and the basic idea is that these will be in the same envelope that's allowed for a single family home. So, and some of the flexibility that we're proposing to introduce in terms of setbacks will be conditioned, or at least one of the reasons for allowing some additional flexibility is to in situations where that will help preserve an existing tree or other type of critical area. So we are taking those into consideration. We're also going to be having further discussions with our stormwater folks about this. So we're those are great comments, and thanks for weighing in. Councilmember Alders.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to point out to everybody here that if you haven't taken the survey yet, the link that Sarah put into the chat, the storymaps.arcgis, actually has some really lovely design examples of what a converted duplex looks like in a subdivision or in an older neighborhood. So it really does add to and kind of round out the presentation that you've seen here tonight, and provide some really nice insight into when you answer the questions in the survey. There's this lovely preparation for you. And also, I just want to thank our staff for everybody here. We have several staff members. We got Mike from Arch here. Thank you so much for putting this on and hosting this discussion.
Let's see, I see it says Brett. I think your hand was up next.
Thanks, and that's it's actually Cynthia on Brett's iPad, but with Brett too. Yeah, I just wanted to build on to what Suzanne said, and Suzanne said, and I just want this noted for sure that there's a sequencing thing here that's very important, and relaxing the zoning code is not the first step. The first step is designing what we want our communities to look like and making sure that we've got that as part of our zoning modifications. So I would hate to see the city, and I will not support the city moving ahead with zoning code modifications without doing that first step, because I think without doing that, we will have the unintended consequences, negative consequences of unsafe areas, not enough parking, stormwater and other environmental impacts, and just basically our neighborhoods, turning it, becoming less desirable. So fully supportive of middle housing, but I think it's very, very important that the city take that first step to really design and imagine what we want our neighborhoods to look like, and then make the zoning code changes that will support that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think in order it was Rosemary Sutton and then Anne after Rosemary.
Hi, I'm sorry I don't have my video on tonight. I just want to say I really appreciate this discussion, and we have been talking about it in a dispassionate manner, but we have a crisis on our hands. We have a crisis of homelessness and people not affording homes, and that impacts all kinds of things. I used to work at Cascadia College. We sometimes couldn't get staff and faculty because of the cost of housing around the Bothell area. We also have a climate crisis, and these things are related. So while we need to take time to work things out, we are in the middle of a crisis. And so encouraging people to not need to use their cars, to be able to walk to transit, that's important. We're in a difficult transition now where people aren't used to that. We don't have as much transit as we like, but it's really important that we move as quickly as we can. I actually think it's a moral imperative. It's the moral imperative of our time. And I just think that we've got to really work hard to try to help our fellow neighbors and people who want to be living in this community, so we have a vibrant community, so people can afford to live here and to work here. And we don't end up with such a hot planet, it's uninhabitable. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you, Rosemary. Appreciate that. And Anne. You're on mute, Anne.
Thank you. First, I would like to second what Cynthia Karlstad said about designing what we would like first, rather than going to starting to consider the code amendments. And in line with that, I remember listening to one of the Planning Commission meetings where I believe you brought up an example from Oregon. It may have been Portland. I cannot remember for sure. But there was a requirement that there really be at least one entrance with just one step in order to access the development. And I thought that was a most practical and thoughtful consideration, because I would think what we're hoping is that there are units that older people who have to move out of their larger homes can actually access. And so I would like to see this particularly accessibility issue stressed as part of that design. And the final question is, I saw mentioned on this list the first time that I've seen this before as part of the missing middle housing, what is called courtyard apartments. And I hadn't seen that as one of the options before. And I don't see that that should be something we should be talking about at this point. So I would take that off the list and focus on the ADUs, any possibility for just the courtyard housing, and missing middle up to 4 plexes.
Thank you. Yeah, the courtyard housing is interesting to me as a planner in Oregon. Some of you may know we passed legislation around middle housing last year, and so we're doing a lot of implementation now. But in the Oregon rules, courtyard housing is not part of the middle housing definition. So I think it really depends on kind of where you go and who you ask if that gets included or not. So thank you for that comment. And then you were correct. It's Portland, and they have what they call visitability requirements. And it's, I don't remember all of the details, but if you had like a quadplex, for example, a fourplex, one of those units would have to have an entrance that didn't have any steps and would have to have a ground floor that had a bedroom and a bathroom, basically an entire unit available on the ground floor for exactly the reasons that you just expressed. And so, yeah, that's something that we've been looking at with the city to see if there's some potential there for Bothell as well. I hope you all can't hear
Thanks.
my dog barking in the background.
Oh, that's your
Um,
dog. Okay, I was just going to suggest that whoever has the dog mute their
Sorry,
microphone.
I would love to mute
But-
my dog, but
One
go
other
ahead.
comment on Courtyard Housing. One reason we included it is at least one of the state bills that was being considered didn't get passed did include Courtyard Housing as one of the middle housing types that communities would have to allow. So we are taking a look at it, and it is a type that would probably require combining two lots. And what it creates then is generally a U-shaped building with common space in the middle, where the ends of those U's are roughly the scale of the single-family houses along the block. So it's a way to potentially get another housing type, perhaps a housing type that tends to be more affordable than some of the others, like townhomes. But that's the reason we are considering that, but I appreciate the comment. And with that, we are getting close now to 7:30, and I have a few final comments. I'm going to scroll to just make sure that nobody else has their hand up. I don't see any. But so in closing, I'd just like to thank you all again for participating on such a beautiful evening. And for all of you who have completed the online survey, I will say that based on the feedback we got tonight, it appears to be much more positive than the general feedback we got on the survey. But we'll be so I do encourage people to go ahead and do the survey, even if you have given us your thoughts tonight. And I'd like to thank our facilitators, Sarah and Sierra from OTAC, Mike Stanger from Arch, and Nathan and Sarah Frost from City of Bothell. I appreciate your help, and all of those who volunteered in the small groups to report back. So please do continue to be involved. Please feel free to send in comments, email comments to me. There's also a Imagine Bothell email address on the middle housing page, so you can send comments there and they'll get to me. You can also weigh in by attending the Planning Commission hearings coming up on June 15th and July 20th. And stay tuned for City Council consideration in the fall after the August break. So those are all going to be opportunities to weigh in further. So with that, good night and enjoy the remainder of the evening. We still have almost an hour or more than an hour and a half before sunset. So enjoy.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.